Thank you, sir, for accepting my invitation and accepting to talk with me.
No problem. Happy to.
You are a doctor, professor of marine biology,
Yes.
Texas A&M University at Galveston. So I thought to introduce you to my audience.
Okay.
So can you please tell me about yourself?
So my name's Tom Illiffe, professor of marine biology at Texas A&M University at Galveston. I teach courses, both graduate courses and undergraduate courses here at the university. I have three students working for me now that are getting their PhD, doctor's degree here with me. But I also, in addition to teaching, do quite a bit of research. And my research concerns studies of animals living in underwater caves, saltwater caves in particular. My name's Tom Illiffe. I'm a professor of marine biology at Texas A&M University at Galveston in the United States. So I do both teaching and research as part of my position. I teach both undergraduate courses in marine biology. We have the largest undergraduate program in marine biology in the United States, with more than 600 students majoring in a marine biology degree. Also, I have three graduate students working for me on their PhD degrees. So in addition to the teaching duties I have, I also do a lot of research. And my research concerns studies of animals, small animals, mostly crustaceans, crab and shrimp-like animals living in deeper waters of saltwater caves along the coastlines in many areas around the world. Now, in order to study these animals and the environments in which they live, it's necessary to use very specialized cave diving techniques. So they're deep underwater. They're oftentimes far back in completely submerged caves. So the only way to get there is by scuba diving. So all the people in my lab are highly trained and highly experienced divers who are diving in these caves and going back a long way, sometimes as much as a kilometer and a half, horizontally, and 30 to 50 meters deep underwater to get to the habitats where the animals live.
Where do these animals live? River, ocean, or sea?
They're animals that live in a saltwater environment. The saltwater is the same content of salt as in the ocean, but they live in oftentimes in inshore caves that have a surface layer of fresh water, but with scuba diving we go down and typically a depth of 10, 15, 20 meters underwater. There is a boundary layer that's called the halocline. And the halocline separates freshwater above from saltwater below. So the halocline can be very thin. You can see it with your naked eye. It can be as thin as a sheet of paper. We penetrate this halocline, and most of the animals we're looking for live underneath the halocline in the fully marine saltwater layer, the same as in the ocean. But they're very specialized animals. They're adapted to living in a cave environment. They've lost their eyes. They've lost their pigmentation because they're living in a habitat where there is absolutely no light at all and never has been. So they adapt to this environment. They are blind, albino organisms that are able to find food, find mates, despite having no light to work with. Many of these animals are actually new animals. undiscovered, undescribed animals that have never been seen before. And we found at least 250 new species of organisms that are living in these saltwater caves.
Okay, so when did you find the first animal in your life?
So I started on this work when I got a job living in Bermuda. Now, Bermuda is a mid-ocean island located out in the North Atlantic Ocean, about 600 kilometers or more off the coast of the United States. And when I got to Bermuda, one of my hobbies had been scuba diving and also exploring caves. And when I got to the island, I found that there were well over 100 caves that were located only 10 minutes away or less from where I was living. So I went and started exploring these caves just for fun. And I found out that on this small island of Bermuda, most of the caves descended down relatively quickly and ended in a saltwater pool. This pool was tidal, had very, very clear blue water, and you could see down into the depths and see that they went a long way. So I got some friends of mine from Florida to come over and teach a specialized cave diving course for myself and several of my local friends in Bermuda. And then we began exploring these caves. And at depth, we started finding all of these strange, undescribed new animals. One of them I sent to a scientist at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, who is one of the foremost experts in the world. And he took a look at some of the animals I sent him, and he wrote back and said, "Tom, I've never seen anything like this in my life." So when you have the best person in the world tell you he's never seen them, you know you've come on to something really neat. You've made a significant discovery. And it was then that I really began my scientific career studying these animals, studying the environment that they are living in, and better understanding what's going on in this totally submerged habitat.
So what is the new thing that you said to the world through your research?
So we found a small crustacean shrimp-like animal. Some of these are in the order of 2 or 3 or as much as 5 centimeters long, but others are down to 5 millimeters or less. So they can be very small animals, but the water in the caves is so clear and there's nothing in the water that if we move our diving light around, when it hits these white animals, it reflects back at us and they're easily visible. So we collect them with our naked eye, see them with our naked eye. We have a small tube and we very carefully collect the animal in the tube to bring it up to the surface. So almost everything we see is a crustacean, crab, shrimp-like animal, but we also see a few worms that are very interesting in the caves and a few mollusks that we're also collecting. So there's not a huge range of animals, but in a given cave, there may be 20, 30 or more animals that are new species we find in just one cave.
So what is the food that they take to survive?
So that's an interesting question. In the surface, most organisms use plant or plant-based sources of nutrition. So animals are eating either plants directly or they eat animals that are eating plants. Now, there's no light, therefore there's no photosynthesis, no plants in these underwater, totally dark caves. So we have recently done some studies to show that there are microorganisms, bacteria living in the caves, and these bacteria are actually carrying out what's called chemosynthesis. instead of using light as a source of energy to make food, these bacteria use chemical energy as a source of energy to make food. And the animals in the caves are eating either the bacteria directly or they're eating the animals that ate the bacteria. So we have a relatively simple food web that's based on bacteria using chemical energy. So they're totally independent from what's going on the surface of the earth. There's a whole independent ecosystem that exists only in the caves and nowhere else on earth.
So how much time you took to know that this animal is taking this kind of food?
So what we have been doing is we've been using stable isotopes. So there's radioactive isotopes and then there's stable. So stable isotopes don't break down. So they're forms of carbon and nitrogen and oxygen particularly. And each organism has a unique stable isotopic signature. So through that, the bacteria that are chemosynthetic have a different stable isotopic signature or pattern than animals that are feeding on plants, say. And we can follow this because basically you are what you eat, meaning that the signature from the bacteria is passed on to the organisms that eat the bacteria. And so we can trace and prove that energy from the bacteria are being transmitted or transferred into the animals in the caves that are eating these bacteria.
So what is the change that you observed when it came to the sunlight?
Not a lot. These animals don't have a lot of response to the sunlight because they don't have any eyes. But if they were brought out to the sunlight and left in an open water because they have no eyes, no pigment, they would readily be prey for fish or other predators in the open water environments. So they can only live in the caves. They can't come out of the caves because they have no defenses. But they're very, very good at living in the caves on the same response. So, for example, the oxygen levels, dissolved oxygen levels in the water in the caves is extraordinarily low. If we took an open water animal and we released it in the deep waters of the caves, they would literally suffocate because there's too little oxygen. So these animals have adapted to low food sources, they've adapted to low oxygen, and they've adapted to totally lightless conditions and feeding on bacteria or animals that feed on bacteria.
How they give birth to a new child?
How did they
give birth?
So they reproduce. Some of them produce eggs. Normally the eggs are larger, but produce offspring that are born in a more advanced state. So larger eggs, more advanced offspring. The offspring develop quicker and develop into the adult form. So there's fewer number of eggs than in normal forms. As I said, larger eggs. And this is an adaptation to the cave environment, allowing the juveniles that are produced to go more directly into the adult stage.
So what is the use of getting these water animals to this world and to getting to know what is the thing that we can understand as a human being?
Well, we have found out some very surprising discoveries that are totally unanticipated. So there's a lot of things in science that you can't predict that you're going to look for and find. So when we went and discovered one particular type of animal, it turns out it was not just a new species. So there's new species, new genus, new family, new class, and one of them was even a new order. So it's a totally different type of animal that's never been seen anywhere else on the planet. And when we began to investigate this animal, in particular, taking the DNA, the genetic code out of the animal and examining it, it turns out that they are very close relatives to insects. So if you want to know about the evolution of insects, you need to be a cave diver and dive in an underwater cave, go a long way back in and find a very tiny animal swimming around in salt water. So it's nothing you would ever predict would happen. So it's shedding light on new discoveries that are totally unanticipated. So we can't predict what we're going to find. We can't predict what's going to happen with these animals or how they can be used.
So how they are forming in that deep water?
So these are animals that have been in the caves for very, very long periods of time. And they have a very unusual distribution. So we started work in the Caribbean, and we found these types of animals on many different islands and in different areas. But then we went to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. We went to Lanzarote, an island in the Canary Islands, located off the coast of Africa in the Atlantic Ocean, and we went diving instead of a limestone cave. Most of the caves we've been diving in are all limestone caves. We went diving in a volcanic cave that was formed by volcanic eruption. And in this volcanic cave, we dove a long way back, and there we found very similar types of animals to the same animals we'd found in the Caribbean area. So the animals on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean are very closely related to one another. This indicates that perhaps these animals began to colonize caves at a time when the Atlantic Ocean was just beginning to form, when Africa and the Americas, Europe and the Americas were all close together, and as they began to split apart, these animals were colonizing caves at the same time. So that's a time about 150 million years ago. It's a time when the dinosaurs were still living on the land areas of the earth. So these animals probably lived and colonized caves at a time prior to the extinction of the dinosaurs. So when the dinosaurs went extinct, these animals in the caves still continued to live. And so they're very, very old, ancient forms that have lived in caves for many tens, if not hundreds of millions of years.
So do these species have the same shape that the insects have?
They are very different shapes. So the animals that we found in the caves that look similar to the insects look more like a centipede. So they're long, thin bodies with many, many legs, but they're very different from the centipedes in other ways. So it looks superficially like a centipede, but actually it's not a centipede, or not related directly to the centipedes.
So how many species might be there in the surface where you have went and did the research?
So we're always finding new species, even in places that I've been diving for a long time and have studied. We can still go in and very commonly find a new species. So we have no idea how many new species are left to discover. I would say that there are many hundreds, if not many, many thousands of undiscovered animals out there that still await discovery.
Is there any connection between those species and humans?
Not directly. They are indicators of the health of the groundwater. So the groundwater is where we get oftentimes our drinking water from. And these animals, their continued existence means that the water is relatively pure, hasn't been contaminated, but people unfortunately are oftentimes pumping their sewage down into the ground and doing other things, putting pesticides or other chemicals on the earth that is seeping down into the groundwater. And these animals are an early warning sign that tells us that the health of our ecosystem, the health of our subterranean waters is in good or poor or endangered situation.
What is the surface that you have seen when you went into deep into the ocean?
So I've done some dives deep in the ocean where we're looking for some of these underwater caves, and we believe that there should be caves deeper in the sea, not just on land, but on the edge of islands, edge of continents as you're going down into the deep water. We did some work off Bermuda where we made dives to a depth of about 120, 130 meters deep. And unfortunately, because of the gas supplies that we were using and the limitations of our own bodies, we could only stay a very short period at that depth. But we looked around, we were able to see there were a lot of potential areas that we could go if we could stay longer and have access at depth to that environment. So we think that there are not only caves on land, but also caves deep in the sea.
Okay, so what are your targets? What are your goals? What do you want to tell to the world in coming days?
Well, I think that the message that I'd like to send out is that sometimes there are very important discoveries made in very unusual places. And because an animal is small, because it appears very tiny, doesn't mean that it's insignificant. It means still that we've got a lot to learn, and these animals are in need of environmental protection. So many of these animals occur only in one cave and nowhere else on the planet. So if that one cave becomes polluted or destroyed for any reason, that these animals go extinct. So environmental protection, promoting the science that enables us to go in and study this previously unknown and undiscovered and unappreciated habitat.
Can they live in another ocean called Indian Ocean?
No, not really. They're, as I said, they're white. They have no eyes. They're adapted to caves, but they're not adapted to life outside the cave. So they can't really ever come outside.
So since how many years you are diving into the
I've been
water?
doing this diving for 30 years now.
Okay, so you're good in swimming and diving.
I think I'm still good. And I plan to continue it hopefully for another 30 plus years more if I could.
Awesome. So, what is the achievement that you felt like I did something great and I introduced something new to the world when you did something Have you ever
Oh, it
felt like
feels
that?
super. It's a rush of adrenaline. Oftentimes, when I'm diving, swimming around in these deep underwater caves, I see something and I know right away that this is something I've never seen. And if I've never seen it, probably most likely it's something new. So right there, the moment I see it, I say, wow. When we get it up to the surface, one of the first things we do is to photograph it. And we send digital photographs off by email to the experts around the world. And within a few hours after we collect it, we know basically for sure whether it's new and how exciting it is.
So do you name that or
I work in conjunction with the scientists who describe the animal. I work with them, and in cooperation with them, we come up with a new scientific name for the animal.
okay? So what is the recent invention that of yours?
What's that?
Recent invention. The last species that you have
Oh,
discovered.
the most recent. Okay. So the most recent is we're describing now an animal that we collected about a year and a half ago from an underwater cave in the Bahamas. It's the same type of animal that I told you was connected or related to the insects, distantly related to the insects. And so we found this a kilometer and a half back in a totally underwater cave that's a sea cave. So the entrance is out in the ocean. We go out in the ocean in a boat, go down and swim a kilometer and a half horizontally to get to a room. The only place we've seen this animal is a small room, and these animals are living up in a pocket of water up in the ceiling.
Okay. So still the work is going on.
Yes, still going on, still continuing, and we're still making discoveries, with the exception of this COVID-19 has put a big hitch in our ability to get out and do field work. But as soon as the vaccines come out, I'm really anxious to get back and begin making my discoveries again.
So what do you say as a person who spend a lot of time in finding the new species? What do you say about this coronavirus?
It's really, I am very concerned about it. I think it's something that I want to protect myself, protect my health, because I want to continue the activities that I do, and my health is critical to being able to do the work. And so it scares me, and I want to take precautions, but I'm anxious for the vaccines to come out so that we can move on with our lives and begin to go back to hopefully or close to the way things were.
Is there any connection between the species that you found with coronavirus?
No, no. I'm going to have to leave now. I've got another meeting.
Okay, okay. Thank you
Okay?
so much for giving your valuable time and
Okay?
giving answers for my questions. Can I put this video on
Okay.
my YouTube and social media
Yes.
on
Can
internet
you
with your permission?
send me the link to it?
Yeah, I will
So,
send after uploading it.
yeah, once you get it uploaded, send me the link.
Yeah, you gave me permission to put it everywhere.
Yes. Okay. Wherever you want.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for giving
Make
your
it look
valuable
good.
time.
Make me look good.
You will look fantastic. I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Bye.